Welcome back to A People's Guide to Publishing. I'm Joe Beal, the founder and CEO of Microcosm Publishing and Distribution. I'm also the author of A People's Guide to Publishing, which distills what I've learned from selling millions of books over the past 25 years.
I'm Ellie Blue. I'm the editorial and marketing director here at Microcosm. We are an independent mid-list publisher based in Portland, Oregon. We have 14 employees, over 650 titles in print with 20 to 40 new books per year, and we distribute thousands of titles from other publishers.
We started this podcast so that we can share what we've learned with newer publishers so that you can learn from our mistakes.
Or maybe you just want to understand the publishing industry.
This week, we are going to talk about how to bypass gatekeepers.
And we're joined by special guest Ariel Gore, author of the forthcoming book, The Wayward Writer, which may actually be out by the time this airs.
The way time works is mysterious.
Which is kind of about how to bypass gatekeepers.
Right, yeah, I guess it is when you look at it that way, And, what are gatekeepers, Ellie?
It's kind of a derogatory term.
Right, it is. Yeah, we've kind of besmirched the name of anybody that might ever tell you no.
I think in some cases it's rightly derogatory. Like, you have the gatekeepers who's saying, like, no, only people that look like me and have my educational and cultural background can be published by this company and have their book sell and be given attention. But then also, like, you could see a gatekeeper as somebody who's just kind of sorting. It was like the filter.
Right, and I think a lot of it is, like, gatekeepers are often rather beleaguered and worn down by sheer volume that makes them kind of bitter, and that communicates to the people that they are gatekeeping that they're just there to tell you no, and that, like, the no is largely arbitrary. So, and I do feel like I have on my wall, we got a rejection letter from Small Press Distribution, which, as one friend put it, they accept everyone. And I still have it on my wall because it says there was no market for our books. And, this is when we had sold just like a few thousand books. And like today we've sold millions of books. So it's like, it is hilarious to say that they are rejecting us because there's no market for our books.
It's a great example of gatekeeping. How would you define gatekeeping?
Well, and that they don't know how to market your books might have been a more appropriate thing to say.
Yes.
Right.
It was a form letter, to be fair, but yeah.
Yeah.
It cannot be done.
But yeah, that's the thing. It's like people are telling you that they don't know how to market your book is what they're telling you. Usually when they're sending you a rejection, or they're sending you a rejection because, book needs a lot more development. And so, it's not like everyone needs to say yes to you. Also, at the height of when I was publishing my zine, Hip Mama, we would get so many submissions that at some point you do just have to burn them.
Right. Yeah, it makes you bitter because you're just getting so much inundation, right?
But as a writer, it does make you feel better because you just think, well, either my thing sucked, or they didn't know how to market it, or they just came to a point in their lives where they had to burn everything. All these things are possible.
I like that you found redemption in this. But,
well, and I think most of the time, people just don't really have the time to read their submissions. They're so overworked.
Yeah. True.
But
sometimes
then
the volume is the
a lot of the gatekeeper stuff is like, did you go to my program? Did you go to a prestigious program? And that's just insane because what are people learning in these big programs? Some things, but there are things that you could cobble together an education that was just as vibrant and even marketable by not doing this specific program, by just learning in all the ways the Teenage Liberation Handbook taught us we could learn.
Right. Yeah. That's a great way to think. And I think you hit on like a really good point, which is like often you will feel gate kept, but you're just pitching the wrong place. And that's like what's actually going on.
Or like I feel like the Teenage Liberation Handbook is a great example because she ended up getting rejected by all the publishers she submitted it to and self-published it. And sold a lot of copies. It's out of print now though because
there's allegedly a new edition, but she doesn't respond to her email and it doesn't seem to be available anywhere. So very maddening because I want to buy and sell the book.
Right. No, that was a great book. And that's the thing. It's like sometimes you hear from authors that are like, they tried to get an agent, it was kind of crickets, or they sent out a few sample chapters and then it was crickets, or some big publisher certainly never got back to them. And of course there is some gatekeeping. If they were married to a major producer with the same exact material, that would have never happened to them. But yeah, so are you kind of pushing the wrong door? Because there are certainly other doors that are open that we can just remove and repurpose. And kind of engaging in relentless improvisation is actually the way into publishing that I know that most people I know have taken and been successful at. And it's hard because if one person says no to your project that you've been working on for 20 years and it's everything and love in this thing, it's really easy to get discouraged and just be like, somebody didn't love me. That's the worst feeling.
I once had this dream that I was going to have like a weekly online column, and then after like the 6th rejection I was like, I can't take this anymore. It's like, it's like you pitch it, and then even when and oftentimes they're really nice where they're like, this is really good, it's just not what we publish, is normally like what they say,
right?
Or they're like, this is really good, but it's like too depthy or too involved or too long. So like they just want really simple, and I just wasn't doing that. But I think that's like, you made a great point that it's like that rejection can be too much.
It can be anywhere from discouraging to devastating. Where you've put your heart in this book. It maybe took you 10 to 20 years to write it. You put everything and you send it out. It's your little puppy, and you send it off, and everybody rejects your little, this puppy that you love, and you can't. It's you want to protect your writing, you want to protect your heart, and it's not about that. It might be this freaking fabulous book, and yet how do you tolerate all this rejection? I mean, that's what kind of a really good agent would protect you from that.
Right.
And so kind of that's why I like agents. If they never send you
call the nose.
These like devastating documents, but you do have to find like, where is my psychic armor that's going to be my own agent and kind of babysit me through this process. And keep coming back to that reality that the process isn't about your experience is lame and your book is weak and you're an imposter.
Right.
It's literally just like, that's not our niche, or it's possibly your book's not ready, and that's if you can kind of take a few days to breathe through that, maybe it's true your book's not ready, but a lot of times we are, since the process is so cloaked in mystique. It's also hard to figure out what would be the appropriate publisher to send this to, and how do you send it to them. People who seem to be working writers are constantly asking me, like, do I need an agent for this big press? Well, yes, you do. Unless, you've developed a memorable, intimate relationship with an editor. And so just going through all those steps I think it means that a lot of books are just sitting in people's drawers that there would be readers for. Maybe all these missing readers would be loved to be reading these books that are in your drawer. And the process can be so demoralizing that we give up.
Yeah, but I think you hit on a couple great things. It's like often, I run into people all the time that think that all publishers are kind of interchangeable and they just need a publisher. But even if you convince the wrong publisher to do it, they can't sell it either. So like that's a large part of the reason for gatekeeping is you want somebody that knows what to do with it and knows how to talk about it and has credibility in that sphere, because otherwise they're going to fall on deaf ears the same way. It's like you just can't get something, you can't get a book placed just because you have a publisher. Then you find out that like their distribution isn't, quite there, or you find out that their reputation or their development skills aren't suited to your book, or you find out that they only sell a different subject well, And so, I don't know, but how do we get around gatekeepers? Like, how do you have how would you communicate what your book is if you're sort of feeling like people are continually just pushing you off?
Well, I mean, you have to start thinking about your book the way a publisher is going to think about it. And like it or not, even though it's your baby and your heart and your whatever it is to you, it ultimately is a product in the marketplace. And, even things, sometimes going to zine fests and, putting out an excerpt as a zine, maybe a few of them, and you notice what people buy and what people are drawn to. And that sometimes a little zinger on the back cover saying what it is actually what causes someone to buy a book or even go into a bookstore yourself. And what am I drawn to? Do I really buy things that have like just a green cover with one title and the author who I've never heard of? Mm-hmm. Probably not. That's a feedback I get from you all when I have self-published something and be like, distribute this, and you be like, you might want to put what it is somewhere on the cover.
That's true.
Right. And my favorite was when we were with IPG still, and their feedback for you was like, Joe, this is actually a very successful author. Her name should be larger on the cover, meaning you.
Right.
And I think the woman never really liked Microcosm, so, I think she was kind of surprised that, like, we had an author that had sold well. But it was, like, often that is the level of feedback, even. It was, like, do people know this name? Like, what are the proper nouns or improper nouns that would tell people what this is?
Is it a novel? Is it a memoir? Is it a how-to book? Like, sometimes that's not clear.
Often.
Yeah, so basic things like that can get around a gatekeeper. I mean, you're going to meet gatekeepers who are just jerks, and they're like, I did all these things, and I'm not going to let go of the key to this door, so just forget it. And that's fine.
Maybe they're ready to burn it all down. Maybe they're burning it all down in that phase.
Right. Well, or we can burn down another door. But the thing is that if you want to publish your book with an outside publisher, you don't want to self-publish it because you don't love publishing, and you want some level of a team to help you, then your task is to get in and to find a way through these doors. And it's usually pretty persistent, improvised, and you know, you feel funny, like going through someone, like, can I have, who's your agent? Maybe they worked really hard to get this agent and may or may not want to share that with you. But that gets into that kind of scarcity thing, especially if you're working on marginalized communities oh, so, my pal so-and-so finally broke in with this publisher who would actually be really appropriate for my book. Can I ask them? You can 100% ask them, and then if they're going to pull gatekeeper on you, that's the kind of thing we have to work with, because there isn't, with all the publishers right now, there isn't really great scarcity in terms of being able to get your book published. It's just finding the right people who are going to be into the book, who you can work with, who maybe have the skills that you don't have. And I also think that, this sort of shame around self-publishing is melting away very slowly. But you just, name your press. It doesn't have to be super obvious that it's self-published. Learn how to publish. Like, that's part of the process. If you're going to self-publish something, like, learn about margins, learn about fonts.
Read Joe's book.
Oh yeah, we have a People's Guide to
Read
Publishing.
Joe's book. Like, that's a whole nother skill set. And it may or may not be something that you want to take on.
Right, yeah.
But
it's a lot to do both.
I think at this point, the thing that gives self-publishing a bad name is the people who are like, oh, well, I wrote the book and that's all there is to it, so I'm just going to shove it in this program, and it's, I want to fit it in the number of pages that I can afford, so I'm just going to make the font like 6 points,
It hurts. But yeah, I think you're right. It's like they think their work is done, they're moving on, and then everybody is like, oh, self-published books are so bad. And they don't have to be.
So since this is a podcast ostensibly for publishers, how can publishers become better and more responsible gatekeepers? Because we go on and on in this podcast about how if you want to get your book published with a publisher, you should follow their rules to the letter. But I feel like we're also wrong about that, because there are so many other ways in if you have that access.
Right,
you
if you know
didn't
people.
go through our submissions form guidelines, Ariel, and
what?
we knew you from other ways, and I think we even approached you, but and like you say, if your husband is a editor, or if your best friend has an in, or if you went to a writing program, there's so many ways in. What can publishers do to make that more level and to give themselves access to more people, so they're not gatekeeping based on race and class and education?
It's it is good to shift that responsibility. I think a lot to me, I don't know. I don't know how much you know about this, but there was a way where the submission form, cover letter, pitch deck thing, I don't remember what the proper term for it is, would be 50 to 100 pages. So basically the way to pitch a publisher is to create this document that is essentially months of work. Yeah, that's writing a book, but it's not the actual book. It's more you're writing marketing materials that sell the book.
Right.
And then so to some degree, most, though not all, places have simplified and to some degree abolished that. But I think it is really just breaking these things down to the most base part of what do you actually need as a publisher to assess a book? How much and what kind of materials and information do you need to be is this a good fit for us or not? And I think it's we struggled similarly to do that. Maybe not, I wouldn't even say struggled. We thought about how to interface with that And that's why I can't remember what it was. We used to just ask for like 3 similar books we'd published, and then like you to describe your book and how it's unique, And we elongated that ironically a little bit because so many people would just kind of fundamentally bend the truth to make what they had fit what we were looking for. And I've heard that actually from a lot of other publishers, that people try to bend things to fit. I did once have somebody pitch a memoir to me as a workbook, and then when I read it and responded and said, well, you said it was a workbook, but this is 50,000 words about you. Where's the workbook? Did you send the wrong file? That's kind of, like that isn't helping other authors. But on another level, it's not helping anybody to create these like incredible hoops to make authors jump through, because what inevitably, like I've sat through these like sales meetings with like the HarperCollins front list, and it'll be like, here's a memoir of a 90-year-old white guy who went to Harvard and now lives in Midtown Manhattan. It's a book about
That's fascinating.
You're just like, what is the book about, though? Like, why would I read this book? And it's like, and then it would be like the next book is the very same book, and you're like, how did these books get published? And then I was like, oh, right, because they have a relationship with an agency who has a relationship with the editor because they work in the law firm next door to. And I was like, okay, like that's the problem of publishing, is the like
that's personal access.
Yeah. So then you have to, like walk your talk. You have to actually be approachable and not have this impossible set of hurdles to jump through. And then you have to actually like evaluate the things equally, even if they aren't in your friend group or your social network or whatever.
Ariel, what do you wish publishers would do to become more accessible equitably?
Well, I think that's great. If they can, say what they want and ask questions that would help one formulate what they want. To go back to the author position, one thing that's really effective is if you have another writer pal, that if you can swap manuscripts and write each other's copy.
Ooh, that's good.
Super smart.
And then work from that as, get your copy back from your writer friend. I think, when other people read your whole manuscript, they can summarize it a lot better than you can. And that's, I think, what we used to rely on publishers for, and just accepting that that's not going to happen. What can publishers do? It's hard saying, because they also have this, they have this problem that they have a revolving door of who works there.
Right.
And I almost never have the same acquiring editor as the editor who has that position when the book comes out, because it takes them a few years, and
they've moved on.
Yeah, and so it's like, as the author, you really do have to have that material. The publishers could have your acquiring editor help you do that early on, so that you have somebody who read your book, who was able to, help you hone in on that. But what usually happens is that 2 years later, you're being asked for the marketing material. You've been surviving those 2 years. You can't remember what your book was about.
This is so relatable.
But if you could have worked with your acquiring editor in that first moment, and they're like, you're in the door at that point. But kind of pinned down, like, how have we kind of distilled what this product is for people? And again, like, it's a product. Even if you're super anti-capitalist, it's, if you want people to read your book, they have to obtain it, even if it's free. You go to a free library on the street corner, you don't just take everything.
Right.
You take the things that are pretty, and something's articulated on the cover that made you say like, oh, this might be a nice way to spend my week.
Yeah. That's exactly it. That's the number one piece of feedback I give to authors is I'm like, go to the bookstore, look at your shelf, see which one, like, see how they're talking about it, see what the language is, see which ones speak to you, ask somebody that works there which ones sell the most and sell the least, because that's helpful too. And that the fact that like this doesn't occur to people, it's just like, I think it's because they don't see themselves as like part of a marketplace. They see themselves as like, I made my baby, my work is done, why are you not languishing me with fame and money?
Right. And that's I love going to zine fests for that purpose. To it's not a insanely capitalist marketplace because it's the creators selling directly to the readers, but you certainly do notice what people are drawn to given their limited amount of time, that they can't see your soul unless they're pretty magical. And so how can you be like, here's a little taste of my soul, like take it or leave it.
Check it out.
I don't need readers who don't believe in, mermaids who would give them affirmations.
Right.
And yet that's not for everyone.
Shockingly.
I like your point though, that like the gatekeeping process goes beyond just acquiring the book and selling the book. Like it is like, not all books are given equal resources and attention. Not all books are going to do the same way once they've been published. I was thinking about events too, because we have acquired a number of books from people who like literally come up to us at events and are like, here's my idea, which like, I don't know. I feel like it's a matter of scale too. Like I'm getting it now that we're getting bigger. Like when we were smaller, like Joe and I would go to every event, or Joe was always on tour, and like a lot of people had access to you because you were out there. And now the busier we get, the more layers there are, and the fewer people you're likely to meet.
And they'll often pitch the wrong person, and then the wrong person will do the wrong thing, and then it'll go to the wrong department, and then the real answer is like, you should send it to submissions.
Yeah, so then people are trying to get that personal connection that they used to be able to get easily.
Well, they're trying to go through the back door because they think the back door is better than the front door. They think the back door will improve their chances when it doesn't.
But it kind of is if you have the right connections.
Well,
You have to pick which back door.
This is getting a little racy. This is a family-friendly podcast.
And like a lot of those things, what I've seen over and over and over again is like the person with the right project will take the time to read, understand, and sometimes the right person will be like, well, you said this, so I thought maybe not mine, but I wanted to talk to you about it anyway. And then you're like, no, that's really good. Like that would really work. And so sometimes like a person is so well behaved that they will be...
Or they gatekeep themselves out.
Yeah, they'll be like culturally programmed not to pitch themselves. And then the wrong people will pitch themselves all day long because they're entitled in that way. Whereas like but what happens most often is somebody, like the right person will read what we want, they'll do their homework, and then they'll come back with like a perfectly executed like submission the first time, and it's like we don't. So to me, as long as it's not too encumbering, like the system works. Like you want to reward, train, people to do it the way that gets them published, so like you want to align all of those motives. Like we want to publish people despite what people that have been rejected by us may believe, and it's like we have to align all those interests. Like that's sort of our job because we're the only one that has access at that part in the chain, and so it's like you just have to not get bitter when you're that filter, and then you have to think about what like what your desired outcome is, or why some things are not getting through, or like you don't want to. And and similarly, if the process is too encumbering, like the the wrong people are going to pitch you all day long because they have time and resources to do that, and the right people probably don't.
Step one is never bring the whole manuscript as a printout. You don't think about how heavy those are, and
Nobody wants them.
they just don't.
They want a little bit.
Yeah, a
Save the
one-page
trees.
summary. And again, if you have to exchange manuscripts with somebody else who you feel great about them and they feel great about you, and just get into that mode, it's like almost an alter ego where the part of yourself that's going to sell yourself is probably not the part of yourself that is writing this kind of deep book. And I kind of think all books are deep books. I don't mean just a tell-all memoir. I think a how-to book is, you've put all this time into it. There is so much of your soul in the book if it's good. And it is necessarily challenging to just walk up to a stranger and be like, do you want my soul? And they're gonna say 9 times out of 10, no.
Right. It takes a certain amount of bravery.
And so it's hard to be like, I am not the work. I am not this, this process. And so yeah, I think that the buddy system with that is great. If you find a buddy who just, the kind of person who tells all their friends how great you are, and without lying, you're like, dang, I am kind of great. And then you can work from there. So it's I mean, that's in some ways like a self-esteem thing, but writers and artists aren't really trained to do that. And people who work in corporate worlds are maybe trained to do a little bit more of that.
So to summarize, you can bypass the gatekeepers by either going at their process very, very well, learning which ones to pitch and giving them the pitch on the side, but in an unobtrusive way that's not your whole manuscript and not requiring a meeting or a phone call, or by having a friend. And publishers can encourage this by making sure they're friends with and going to events of a wide range of people.
People that aren't like themselves.
Yeah, people not like themselves. Or people who are like the people that they want to publish the books of, I guess.
Right. Yeah.
And making sure their process is more streamlined.
And I think it's like the perception that publishers don't want to be approached is false. Like, publishers want to be approached by projects they can publish.
Yeah.
Like, I would never mind like and I mean we met one of our authors in an elevator at a trade show.
That's true.
And she was very meek and very nice, and I tell that story all the time because it's the kind of thing that authors think they shouldn't do when they should do it to the right person.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I don't know. I think it's like it's an art and a science. There's an intersection.
I mean, a lot of my books are from from publishers approaching me and me putting myself out there to the point, again, in small projects and zines, this type of thing. So I don't have this massive platform by social influencers standards, but I put myself out there enough that people approach me, and those are really the people who are most of the time the best to work with, because they feel like they discovered you, or at least found you, like you are definitely doing something that they want to do. So for publishers, putting themselves in that position as much as possible, instead of just sitting around being like, oh, I wish I had more marginalized authors. Like, okay, well, where is that work coming from? And making and doing that work to make relationships with people who are otherwise just going to be banging their head against the wall trying to send their proposals out to people who aren't looking for them.
Right. Yeah. And that's true. It's like if somebody seeks you out, they've chosen you for a reason. They could have. There's millions of authors. They chose you. And that's so. Yeah. I guess it's like being out there is the first step towards that.
And if you are out there selling your own small projects, then it puts you in a different position as a writer too, because then you can say to this publisher or this agent, like, what can you do for me?
Yep. Yeah, or no. Is often the fine answer if it's not for you.
Right. And so then it changes the dynamic a little bit, where it's not like writers are desperately going around knocking on doors. It's like writers are actually producing a very important part of the book.
Writers need to do a little gatekeeping too.
Yeah.
Well, or just put ourselves out there in small, manageable ways. And, if you're successful enough as a zinester, somebody's going to start calling you. And then you have to decide, like, would they be subtracting from my business, or do they actually have resources that can help me and do the things that I can't do?
Thanks for joining us once again.
Please send your questions to podcast@microcosmpublishing.com so we can answer them on future episodes.
And please give us 5 stars on iTunes and everywhere else that podcasts are reviewed.
You can find us on the internet at microcosm.pub,
On Twitter at Microcosm,
on Facebook at Microcosm Publishing,
on Instagram at Microcosm_pub.
and here in Portland, Oregon on North Williams Avenue.
Thank you so much.
Have a wonderful week.